You know, every once in a while, spirit crosses your paths with somebody, and if you miss the cue, spirit goes again and again and again. It turns out that Edie Weinstein and I were both living in South Florida 26 years ago when Hurricane Andrew came through. Ruined her house, left mine alone. She came back here then. And I never met Edie when we were living in South Florida together because it's a big place and I wasn't paying attention.
Go figure.
But Spirit has given us another pitch, and now we're in Philadelphia, and Edie is on her spiritual path and sharing her truth in a wonderful and delightful and uplifting way, and keeps on saying yes. So the Higher Vibe Music Festival came along, and Edie said, yes, I want to be involved. And she has an entire career in publishing and promotion, so that's what she's doing for the festival, saying yes and letting her light shine. And she's with us this morning to let us know how her light has been shining in other ways. Please welcome Edie Weinstein.
Can everyone, I don't know if you'll be able to, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, and if you can't, you come over here. When was the last time you had a conversation with the moon? Or made a wish on a falling star? Held hope from a string of delicate things. When was the last time you got lost in an enchanted wood? Or were kissed by a prince who turned into a frog? Insulted a caterpillar? Or kidnapped a myth? Had a visit from your fairy godmother who turned pumpkins into coaches and wishes into wings. When was the last time you cried lost tears into a pool of lake of longing? I've seen this so many times that I'm trying to second guess what it is. We must just run through the whole thing. Or sipped inspiration. Just keep rolling through, it's okay. From the pool of wonder. You do the whole thing. Or rose like a phoenix, victorious. From the ashes. When did you last lay your head in the lap of awe and listen to a song from a distant shore called home? The time is now. Leap, soar, explore, remember your dreams and unseen things. Sing with rapture. Dance. 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 Like a dervish. And when imagination knocks, open the door. I first saw this video in 2003. It was created by these two amazing filmmakers, musicians, artists, Angie Solins and Silas Tobal. And I fell in love with it. as you can imagine. I get goosebumps every time I see it. Sometimes I even cry. So I encourage you to look at it if you want to watch it again. It's called A Knock at the Door. And as Bill was talking about, we never know what impact someone's going to have on our lives. So I shared the video with a lot of people. I watched it over and over again, but hadn't gotten in touch with them. And I meant to. And in March of this year, I get an email from this woman named Angie Sullins, who's a greeting card designer, and I've been a greeting card text writer for a number of years. And she said, I love one of your pieces. It's called Optimistic. And what it said is, I'm not just an optimist, I'm an optimistic who sees the world through the eyes of possibility. She said, I'd like to use that on one of my cards. Would that be okay? And I said, sure. I would love to talk to you about it. So roll the clock back. I can't even remember the very first time I had this thought that I wanted to visit Ireland. And in this lifetime, my heritage is Eastern European, Russian, Jewish. So there's no, as far as I know, and I haven't done any of the 23andMe, the DNA stuff, but you never know. There's no actual connection to Ireland in this lifetime. I'm sure it's past life because I felt a kinship with the people, with the music, with the culture, the writing. John O'Donohue, if you're familiar with him, was one of my favorite authors who died a few years ago. He's an author, a priest, philosopher who grew up in Ireland. And I always loved his work. So I said, someday, Sandy and I were talking about bucket list, someday I'm going to go to Ireland. Fast forward again, my birthday is coming up in October, I'm going to be 60. And I said, if not now, when? So I said, all right, Spirit, you be my tour guide. I'm not a drinker, so a pub tour wouldn't have been good, it wouldn't have been much fun. Although I did, I did go to pubs when I went to Ireland for the music. So I said, okay, it needs to be something really special. And I said, I'm trusting you to figure out all the details. Then I was talking to my friend Yvonne Kay, who's an amazing, she's been my mentor for 30 years. She's now in her middle 80s and was 3 years ago was widowed. And her partner John, although they were never actually married, I still call him her husband. John had spent time in Ireland, and Yvonne's heritage is English and Irish. And John was her tour guide. So I said, all right, John, help me out here too. Send me to the right tour. So Angie and I had connected via Facebook, and a few days after the initial contact, what do I see on her page but she's leading a tour to Ireland. And there was one space left. And it was called the Muse Juice Tour. Angie is a muse, like creative muse. And when I read her website, I said, oh my God, she's me on steroids. She's got, and those of you who know me probably know what I'm talking about. It's a little scary. And I didn't find out how scary until I went there. And her hair is bright, like Kool-Aid pink, red, kind of, So I said, all right, I'm in love with this woman. I really have to go. And her husband, this is to give you an idea of what they're like. When they got married, their theme of their wedding was Alice in Wonderland. So I think he was the Mad Hatter. She might have been the Queen of Hearts or something. I don't know. But if you look on their website, you'll see the pictures from the wedding. They live out in Taos, New Mexico. So I said, all right, I'm going to contact her. And I said, I know you only have one space left. Hold it for me for the day if you can. I'm going to check my schedule. I'm going to check my finances. And by the way, I'm looking for a sign that says I'm supposed to do this. So she says, okay, no problem. One of my many hats is that I teach mindfulness and meditation and yoga for tiny humans, 4 to 6 year olds in a daycare center. So I walk into the place, and I have to get my security badge every time, even though they know me. And the woman that checks me in was wearing this gorgeous scarf. And I said, where did you get that? And I look at the bottom of it, and there's a shamrock on it. And I said, did you get that in Ireland? She says, no, but I've always wanted to go. So I said, I told her my story. She said, I'm your sign, you need to go. And I want to hear about your trip when you get back. So I called Angie when I got home. I said, yes, I'm in. And then I got, those flutters that say, oh my God, I got what I asked for, now what? And so I planned the trip, and this was in March. In April Fool's Day, Easter Sunday, I got pneumonia. And I thought, uh-oh, and the trip was scheduled in May. And I was in the hospital for 3 days. And I thought, uh-oh, how am I going to do this? And people kept assuring me, you're going to be fine, it'll work out. And people took, uncharacteristic, I let people take care of me because I'm not very good at that. I'm more the giver than the receiver. Anybody else here have that malady where you're much better at giving than receiving. But I allowed my friends to do that. One of my friends is a fellow laughter yoga leader. His name is Ernie Octay, and he came over to my house with food and this little notepad. It says "Follow Your Bliss." One of my also many hats is that I call myself the Bliss Mistress because I teach people how to live their bliss. So this says "Follow Your Bliss," and I hadn't looked at the back of it until he left. Who do you think created it? Angie Sullins and Silas Tobal, the people that created the video, the people that were leading the tour. And Ernie had no clue the people's names. So this was another affirmation from Spirit that I was supposed to do this, that I was going to go on the trip, and that everything would be fine. By the time the trip occurred, May 20th, I was fine. I was breathing easily. I took my inhaler. I only needed it twice, and that was it. And it was a pretty rigorous trip. We walked around a lot. So that was the beginning. Like I said, the trip didn't start in May. It started back in 2003. So that was the beginning of the official part of the trip when I boarded the plane in Philly. And when I went there, I took with me 2 pictures of John, who was Yvonne's husband, partner. One of them was when he was 17 years old in the British Royal Navy, and the other was a more recent picture in his 70s. John died of cancer, and I actually didn't get to know him very well up until a few years before he died. Now, I knew he was Yvonne's sweetheart. I knew how much she loved him, but I didn't know much about him, and she kind of filled me in on the details. So I took these 2 pictures with me, and I said, all right, John, I'm really going to need you here because I have no clue. I don't know anybody on this tour. I need your strength, your support. And Yvonne said, you got to visit this. These are the places that John took me. Every single one of them was on the tour. And she didn't know that. So I took pictures along the way. One of the places we went was called St. Bridget's Well, and there are a number of them in the country. And I walked in, and there are pictures of people who've died, prayer icons, rosary beads, and John said to me, leave me here. And I said, but these are dead people. And he says, I'm dead too. So I said, all right, you're in good hands. So I left his 17-year-old picture there. And I, of course, being a Facebook fanatic, I took pictures, posted on Facebook, tagged Yvonne, and she was in tears, and it really melted her. But John followed me every step of the way. One of the things that I do is that I do free hugs. So I'm one of those goofy people that stands on street corners and hugs strangers. So the hug exercise here was no big deal. But I hugged my way across Ireland. And one of my favorite huggers was this young man, probably in his late teens, early 20s, it was called Ayers Square Park in Galway. I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's a beautiful, big park. And he was about yo-big with dreads down to here, shirtless, and then he had this big bubble wand. Oh, the last time I spoke, I forget which the other location, it was 11:11 also. So we're at 11:11 now. I looked at the clock the last time too, and it was there. So what's that?
There's only one.
Only one, yeah, absolutely. So I don't even remember the young man's name, but he had this big stick with string on it. It was like a big bubble wand, and he had this container that he dipped it in, and the bubbles were massive. So people were dancing around in the bubbles, and he hugged me, and we took our picture together. And then I did some more hugging, came back through the park, he says, come here. And he said, can I use you as kind of a model? And he's leaning over me like this, and he's rubbing his head up against me. And he says, I want to get patchouli on you. He says, and you come from the land of the purple marshmallow people. And he was probably smoking purple marshmallows because my hair was really vividly purple back then. So that was one of my highlights. Oh, the other highlight, you're welcome to sit, that actually came before. Another one of those cosmic coincidences. 2 weeks before the trip, I was on a train coming back from a laughter yoga event in Philadelphia. It was World Laughter Day in May, 2 weeks before the trip. And I hear this man talking to his 2-year-old son a couple rows behind me. And the little boy was crying. He was pretty upset. So I went back and gave him a little feather. Now, you all have feathers on your chairs. I always give feathers out because I'm a clown. My character's a fairy. Her name is Feather. But it reminds people to lighten up or tickle your fancy or whatever else you have in mind. So, but I asked the little boy, would you like a feather? No. And I said, okay, how about if I give it to your daddy? And he saves it to give it to you for later. Okay. So the dad's talking to him again. I said, do I detect an Irish accent? And he says, yes, I'm from Ireland. And then I told him about my trip, and he says, well, you'll have a wonderful time. And I'm thinking, this guy looks so familiar. Where do I know him from? So as he's leaving the train, I said, what's your name? He says, Jay Murphy. And I said, God, and he just kind of trots off with his son. When I get home, I look it up. Turns out that 5 years earlier, we were speaking at an event called Mo Mondays, which stands for Motivational Mondays. It's like a local version of a TED Talk. And this man was talking about his experience of growing up in Ireland. He was a musician. I believe his father was a musician. And at dinner that night, I was sitting next to him, and I said, where does a vegetarian teetotaler go in Ireland? And he says, darling, a vegetarian teetotaler doesn't go to Ireland. She goes to Ohio. So again, 5 years later, 2 weeks before my trip to Ireland, Jay Murphy shows up. So he's a local musician. Look him up. I don't know where, what bar, what pub he performs at. Okay, so I'm back in Ireland doing the free hugs thing. That was part of my, my joy of being there as well. And got that one. The trip. One of the places we walked was a majorly uphill, I thought, steep path to what's called a green road. They have a lot of them in Ireland, where there are rocks around and there's grass around, but there's like a mowed path that you walk. And I didn't get all the way up there, and I was walking with some of my friends because I was pacing myself. I was probably one of the oldest ones there, and I thought, okay, I got to prove myself. And then I said, no, you don't. You just have a good time. And one of the places we passed had these little sheepdogs. Now, the thing about Ireland, if you've never been there, there are probably more sheep than people. Ireland has something like 5 million people and a whole lot more sheep than that. And a traffic jam in Ireland is sheep. Kind of like geese here. When geese cross the road, traffic stops. Well, when sheep cross the road, traffic stops. And they're dyed different colors. Do you know why? So they don't brand them, they dye them, so that the farmers, the ranchers know whose sheep are whose. And I don't know what the code is, I'm not sure, because some of them are rainbow. And being the rainbow sheep of my family, I really appreciated that. So these were sheep herding dogs, and there were 3 of them. And I got partway up the hill, and I told one of the new friends, my roommate actually, that I was going to turn around and go back to the visitor center, and I would just meet them there. So one of the dogs, this little black and white border collie, it looked like a puppy, kept grabbing my wrist, not biting it, like, come on, come on, come on. And I said, you got to go home. Your people are going to miss you. There was no collar, no tag on this dog. So I had no clue if he even knew how to get back home from the visitor center. It just kept following me. And the message that I kept getting from this dog was, you need to play. You need to stop worrying and just have fun and just, let me lead you. So we got down to the visitor center. The dog waited with me until the tour bus came and picked me up again. Didn't beg for food, didn't go into the visitor center, and just sat with me. Afterward, I was looking at the logo for this visitor center, and it was that dog. So that was another one. Nature speaks to you in Ireland. There was one place that had standing stone circles, kind of like a mini Stonehenge, and in the middle of it was this huge boulder, probably, I don't know, like twice this size. And my mother had always been the rock of the family, and I inherited that tendency, the rock that everybody could lean on. And I would say to her sometimes, Mom, rocks crumble. So when I had kidney stones twice, I said, all right, the rocks are crumbling. I need to just, again, slow down, get taken care of, take care of my body. But the rock spoke to me and said, lean into me. I can take it. You don't need to be the rock anymore. So there were 2 other women there standing there with me, and all 3 of us leaned into it like we were embracing it. And then we all 3 lay back against it, facing the sun. And I call it the Mama Rock. And my mother died in 2010, so it was like she was there with me as well. Okay. How are we on time? Like almost? It's 11:17.
Couple minutes.
Okay, cool. So at each step of the way, I found myself falling in love with this country and the people. I was also there during during the vote in Ireland, and I don't know what anybody's politics are here, and I'm not judging it one way or the other. And I met a lot of people that were yes people. They had the buttons that said, in Gaelic, the word yes is tall, T-A, but it's pronounced tall, like tall. And I was talking to one doctor there, who they call themselves GPs, general practitioners, and I said, I'm not pro-abortion, but I am pro-choice. And she said, we're not pro-abortion either. And a lot of people came back to Ireland to vote. A lot of people came back to visit to vote. And I have a friend who moved here from Ireland in 1988. He said, I wish you could vote for me. And he said, I wish I could too. And the other part of it was there were no violent uprisings, no violent protests. It was all very peaceful and amazing. Just like in this country, so many young people, young women in particular, but and men too, but more young women were saying, we want to claim ourselves back. We want to claim our lives back. So I admire that you're all here as young people embracing your truth spiritually and musically. I mean, just that was extraordinary. You know? So that inspired me too. The people, the music, the environment, the wind. I slowed down enough to let the wind speak to me, to listen to what the wind was saying. So there were other adventures that occurred, but those are the things that really stood out for me, was that when we allow ourselves to be led by spirit, magical things happen. We don't have to stage manage, and that's hard for me. I'm somewhat of a control freak. And anybody else here with that too? Like, I want it my way, and you want God to do it your way, and he, she, it doesn't always. But when I've had Godversations, and I have them constantly, God has said, have I ever dropped you? Has anything ever not worked out even better than you thought it would? Because had I gone on a traditional tour, I would never have experienced this. Our tour guide, Kevin Clancy, grew up in Ireland and had been a photojournalist for most of his career, left that job 11 years ago and became a tour bus driver. And he took us to a lot of out-of-the-way places where we got to see things that tourists don't normally see. We went to 2 beaches where tourists don't normally go, just locals go. And he and I had some amazing conversations. He was also a marathon runner, a vegetarian, and pretty spiritual dude. So having that experience was helpful. Meeting all these people on the tour that had gone on tours with Angie and Silas before, watching the two of them together, seeing what partnership looks like under stressful circumstances, because the trip was not always easy for everybody. And everybody had their own agendas, everybody had their own ways of doing things, but it was just such a blast. And I encourage you to see the world, because I don't just see myself as an American citizen, I see myself as a citizen of the world. And I feel like an honorary, that Ireland is now part of my home, part of myself. And I'm going to close with a quote from John O'Donohue, and he was actually what motivated Angie to go to Ireland, because she found John's work to be inspirational. We actually went to his gravesite, and we sat there and we told stories, and we left little gifts at his grave, and then we went to a pub around the corner in his, that was named for him. My favorite quote, and John O'Donohue talks about the idea of anam cara. Have you ever heard that term? Soul friend. So when you meet somebody, you feel like, they're already a part of you, that there's an immediate connection, like, oh, there you are, where have you been, kind of thing. And it could be a lover, a partner, a friend. It could be somebody that you meet just for one instant and they've changed your life forever. Well, I look at the country itself as that it's become a soul friend. And a few months later, it's still, part of me is still there. So I want to close with my favorite quote from John. And this is something that he would probably say to you if he was here right now. May you experience each day as a sacred gift woven around the heart of wonder. Thank you.